Well, welcome. We are so excited that you are here and joining us for a discussion about mental health with children, as well as our own mental health during this very chaotic and crazy time in our society. My name is Dr. Christy Opiola, and I'm an assistant professor here at UNC Charlotte in the counseling department, and I specialize in play therapy. I myself and my 4 additional panelists, who I'll introduce in a minute, all have experience in play therapy, mental health, some of us in schools, some of us in community settings, but we all have an extensive background in child development, and we hope today's panel will be informative, also informal, so please send notes as we're talking in the chat bar, and we will do our best to answer your questions as we go. I also want to just put a disclaimer. We're not able to share specific case advice. Although we're all licensed, that requires you to have a consultation with a therapist. So if you are giving specific we have a resource page that will let you know how you can find a therapist in your area. I'm happy to talk to you about that. At our very last slide has our contact information, and we're happy to connect you with therapists in the area if you're needing more specific help or advice for your own child or for yourself. First, I want to introduce Dr. Phyllis Post, a colleague of mine and friend. She is a counselor educator here at UNC Charlotte and specializes in play therapy interventions for the past 20 years. She created and directs our Multicultural Play Therapy Center and graduate certificate in play therapy at UNCC. She also enjoys writing and conducting research about the effectiveness of child-centered play therapy and diversity in play therapy. Sorry, I'm working on 2 screens, so if you see me look up, I'm looking at my other screen to make sure I did. This is Julie Callahan. Julie is a national certified counselor, a licensed professional counselor, and a registered play therapist. She's also an alum of UNC Charlotte. She received a master's degree from UNC Charlotte in school counseling. She began her career as a school counselor, and she brings experience working with children beginning at age 2 all the way through college. As well as working with people in a variety of modalities such as play therapy, solution-focused brief therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and person-centered counseling. She particularly enjoys working with kids with learning differences and disabilities, including ADHD, processing disorders, autism spectrum disorder. When she's not working, Julie is often found walking her dog with her family and enjoys reading and doing yoga for relaxation. Next, we have Cherie Harper. Cherie Harper is a graduate of our program in her master's degree and now has come back to join us as a doctoral student in our counselor education program here at UNC Charlotte. She received her bachelor's of education in behavioral science and child development and family studies with a minor in psychology. She was busy at East Tennessee State University. And then she graduated from our master's program in school counseling and a graduate certificate in play therapy from UNC Charlotte. And she began the addictions track because she found that all of those areas are really important in her work, both in the schools and the community setting. She has worked as a middle school and elementary school counselor. And she's been doing that for 7+ years and 2 years in North Carolina districts. And then last is Miss Taylor Quick, who is a licensed counselor, associate, and board certified mental health counselor here in North Carolina, who specializes in play therapy. She completed both her bachelor's and master's degree in our own college here at the College of Education at UNC Charlotte. She currently works at Zola Counseling in South Charlotte area, where she passionately supports children and parents from diverse backgrounds who are dealing with parent separation and divorce, death of a parent or a family member, body image, racial trauma, abuse, crisis, self-esteem, and behavior disruptions. Taylor also has a new venture. She is a social media guru and can be followed at Kids Are Capable for educational support for parents and encouragement. So I'm managing 2 screens. Let's see. Just did that. Our hope today is that these will be informative and offer strategies for you to support your children from pre-K all the way till 12th grade. And we have 3 learning goals today that we hope to accomplish. One is to talk about mental health challenges for parents, teens, kids, and adults, as well as identify ways caregivers can recognize their children's mental health needs and how you can respond when your child is struggling. We're going to do a panel instead of just share or just give you information. So please make sure if you have questions as we're talking that you put them in the chat bar so that we can respond to them for you. And so let's get started. Before we jump in totally, I wanted to share kind of who's going to be addressing each topic. So Ms. Taylor Quick specializes in working with our younger children in the therapy world. So she's going to be addressing from a developmental stance questions about toddlers and preschoolers. And Ms. Cherie Harper is going to talk about school-age children. And then Julie is going to do tweens, teens, and college-age students. And Dr. Post will be filling in and sharing a bit about our current state and some of the worries or concerns we have about the future for our children around mental health. And then together we'll all be discussing healthy coping strategies for your children, but also for you as parents, because we play a big part in helping our children cope and be resilient at really difficult times. When we think about just children in general, we want to address that children's first teachers are in their home with you as the parent, that you're the one who starts to lay the foundation for how children will manage really difficult situations. And we help them develop in all areas very holistically. So their social, emotional, physical development, and crazy times like our current situation can really have an impact in all of those areas for not only your children, but you. And so we want to remember that we are key personnel in our children's lives, but we also need to support ourselves during that too. And we hope to address some of those things today. We have found, and the research shows us that about 1 in 5 children are experiencing some type of mental health concern or issue, and that is pre-COVID. So that is not due to our current situation. That is pretty stable research over the last 20, 25 years that we have about 1 in 5 children needing mental health services. But of those 1 in 5, so about 20% of children across the US, only about 20% of them get stable mental health services. So there is a big gap in limited resources for many of our children out in our communities. And we know that parents love their children unconditionally and want the very best for them, but they have some challenges to getting the help and services that kids need. One of the biggest is that they are utilizing all the skills that they know how to help their child. And they're not always certain of when mental health needs need professional help. Or the other thing that I've heard a lot from parents is that parents go to other people and they get a lot of advice, and advice is very conflicting. So they're trying lots of different things, but it doesn't feel like things are helping or supporting them. And we're just not sure what the best answer is. Parenting is one of the hardest jobs on this planet, and everyone feels like they should give you advice and tell you how to parent better. So we know it comes with lots of challenges as you're going along. And not only is that just the norm for parents, then you add something like COVID, the civil unrest, election craziness, and just trying times, financial distress, job uncertainty, and that adds a whole new layer for you as the parent, but then also for your children, because they're feeding off of the environment that they're living in. So kind of setting that foundation, my first question for the panel is, what current mental health challenges have you seen in children, and how might different age children exhibit these challenges? And I'm going to start with Taylor, if you could address it from a young child, so preschool and below. What challenges do you see that young children experience, and how might parents know that they might need more support?
Sure. Thanks, Christy. So I'll tie in the challenges with the emotions and behaviors, because from a toddler's point of view, they thrive through predictable routines. and they are learning how to work through their feelings. And when parents or significant protectors are managing and knowing how to work through their feelings, then that helps toddlers really understand how to keep their calm. And because their routines are disrupted, their safety has felt like it's been disrupted, and they are trying to figure out their entire world right now. And so they are growing and changing all the time in their bodies. And so they're juggling that on top of these changes happening all around. And so for toddlers, what I see right now is really them increasing aggressive behaviors. So more biting, more hitting, maybe some regressing when it comes to potty accidents and toilet accidents, more nightmares, and more tantrums, where tantrums are usually hard to figure out how to manage, but now they feel a little bit more challenging to figure out how to manage and support them through, as well as bigger feelings that are tough for them to regulate. And just overall, really seeing toddlers seeking connection with their parents that feels safe.
Thank you. Cherie, will you kind of kick us off with some areas of that we want to address for school age or concerns, struggles that you're seeing in school age children?
Yes. So I wanted to bring up just like a couple examples that I saw as I was in the school setting and worked in the school setting. So, well, first I want to just kind of highlight the fact that I like to be cognizant about like the actual diagnosis and things that have been placed on children, and knowing that oftentimes that the behaviors that they exhibit are symptoms of a larger or more kind of prominent issue. So it's so important to look at the whole child and all these different factors that are impacting the child. But in terms of the school setting, see trauma, whether it's a small trauma or a bigger trauma, the sense of like grief and loss. So I saw a lot of that, whether it's parent deaths, family, other family members, pets, friendships, the loss of friendships, just exposure to violence, abuse, neglect, substance abuse, racial injustice, systemic oppression. So all these different things and all these different factors that may show up in terms of behavior. So you might see aggression, you might see kids that are maybe talking back or quote unquote being disrespectful, almost just kind of reacting to things that are being said to them, and not basically almost having this kind of trauma informed kind of care that's being provided for them. See a lot of transition adjustment. So whether it's moving from a new school or a new state, a new country, and just adapting and changing to life changes, and whether that's just in the classroom, interacting with other students. And I just had an example too that I thought about of a student who came from Honduras, and she would not go into her classroom. She would not go into her classroom. She wouldn't, and she couldn't speak English fluently. So she would run. She would essentially run, and once we were able to kind of get the supports in and understand where she was coming from and get the translation, she saw a lot of trauma. She saw a lot of violence. She saw a lot of things coming from where she was coming from, and this was a completely different environment, completely different culture that she was having to adjust to. Um, so it's just like, again, just keeping in mind and what those behaviors look like. And those behaviors that she displayed were, it seemed like she was being defiant, that she wasn't listening, and things like that. But again, there was this trauma standpoint, there was this transition and adjustment that she was working through. And essentially, one huge thing that I definitely see was anxiety. I mean, across the board, whether kindergarten all the way to fifth grade, just anxiety. And a lot of times that's internalized. So a lot of times it's not really shown outward in an outwardly way. But you can see it pretty much through, it might be crying, it might be isolating oneself, withdrawal, avoidance, just these constant questions and constant reassurance of wanting to know Is everything going to be okay? And then a lot of times parents see in the home like these tantrums and meltdowns. And I think of that as like just them just having so much uncertainty and not knowing how to cope with it effectively and not knowing how to actually express it through their words. Because again, if we think about it, and I think about it in terms of play and think about it in terms of developmentally. So a lot of times we're asking kids, like, how are you feeling? Or how are you, we're asking these questions. And a lot of times they aren't developmentally there. They aren't cognitively there to be able to express with words where they are and what's going on, verbalize it. So a lot of times it's actually through their play. So if we kind of observe from the outside looking at their play, a lot of times they're playing out things that's going on in life. And so we could see it through there. But I think other things that you may see is just like attention issues, which may be labeled as ADHD, just problems focusing in the class, on schoolwork, these social skills issues like interacting with their peers, getting along with them, keeping friends, maintaining friendships. That was huge. That was huge across the board. Academics, so falling academics or kids not really reaching their potential of where they should be or could be. And just that continued fear and worries that are going on. And then it's like levels. So now we have the pandemic, then we have civil unrest, and we have elections. So there's so many different factors, and it's just so much that kids are going through.
Yeah, so far both you and Taylor had kind of mentioned two things with some similarities. One being that children are doing their best to express themselves through their behaviors. And we need to be quick not to just make assumptions based off of behaviors, but look more holistically at the child and see what might be underlying that behavior. And then the other thing that kids are really feeling the anxiety of and the pressures of their environment. So if that's the school environment, or if that's home environment, or that's our communities in general, that we're seeing some anxiety, and that can be expressed inward or outwardly. So we might see it in a behavior, or they might get really quiet and not be themselves. Julie, how about for you? Can you share a little bit about, for our tweens, teens, and young adults, what are some of the mental health challenges that you've seen for the individuals that you work with?
I would definitely agree with both Taylor and Cherie that we do see a lot of regressions. And regressions in an 11 or 12-year-old could look like the children are acting, say, you're acting like a 5-year-old, because they're having trouble and they're having struggles with what's going on around them. They're also anxious. They're also, lack of motivation is one of the biggest things that I've seen with kids. I'm aware I've gotten used to screens, and I'm a play therapist, and I'm used to playing on the floor with children. I'm used to being in person with people and that connection. And so many kids are having trouble with lack of motivation. They can't connect with their teachers. They need more of a hands-on learning education. They're not with their peers. Maybe their parents are working and they assume that because they're 11 to 20, they can handle it on their own. And they don't have the ability to have their parents around. So the lack of motivation, there's a lot of struggle with school. Some kids can learn just like that. Other kids, the ones that I love to work with, the ADHD, the ODD, your kids with big behavioral problems already that they're struggling with, this is making some of those even more challenging. And as well as, this is the age where kids are supposed to be trying to find themselves. And so you're going to have crankiness, you're going to have lack of motivation, you're going to have distraction, you're going to have pushbacks and attitude. Well, is it the pandemic, or is it being a typical teenager? So that's another area where there has been concern. I've talked recently with many young seniors and freshmen, and the struggle has been they don't have those things that they're used to having. They're missing out on things, so there is a lot of grief as well. I will tell you, my son was supposed to graduate last year. He did, and no graduation. So just those things that we are so used to, they're missing out on. So there's a lot of grief going on as well. So I'd say anxiety, grief, social disconnection. the transitions are huge, and there's just a lot going on across those age groups, very similar to what Taylor and Cherie said.
You've all mentioned some of our mental health diagnoses, and so this is not one of the questions that we pre-planned for, so I'm going to throw our panel a little bit of a loop here. But what are, would you say, the common diagnoses that you're hearing about in practice, professionally for children? So you guys have mentioned kids being anxious, you've mentioned acronyms like ODD or ADHD. Can you just share a little bit more, maybe what those diagnoses, you don't need to go into detail, we have resources for you, but maybe just say the words and some of the things that are bringing kids into your office or that are getting diagnosed by physicians, psychiatrists, that kind of stuff.
ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. This can look like rages out of nowhere. They can last for 5 minutes to a half an hour, screaming, yelling, throwing things, just seeming to go from 0 to 60 in a matter of seconds. I see a lot of that. ADHD, because the kids are so distracted or they can't sit still. They're having trouble sitting in their Zoom classes. And I would also say anxiety would be another one that I see a lot of.
And I would have to say the top 2 that I saw very frequently was ADHD and anxiety. And the ADHD, whether it was the attention or just the inattention, so, or a combination of both, and what that looked like, again, across grade levels. And definitely anxiety as well. That was something that was huge as well. And again, just the probably more internalized kind of thing, asking a lot of questions and the meltdowns and just not being able to effectively cope with the uncertainty.
I'll also agree with that. And with adjustment disorder with anxiety, where there's just more of that fear of being separated from your loved ones and lots of worries.
Recently, I've been working more in schools and in classrooms, and so we don't have the diagnosis because it's not a private practice. But I do want to say that my experience in these classrooms is it is the ADHD, it is the aggressive behaviors that are most disruptive in the classroom and most troublesome to teachers. I notice that the children who are depressed, they're more withdrawn, and we have to work with teachers to make sure we don't forget about those children and that anxiety. So it's easier to ignore somebody who's withdrawn than it is to ignore somebody who's throwing a desk around the room. So that's not about diagnosis specifically, but I think we see it in classrooms every day.
Yeah, I was gonna say depression is another one we haven't mentioned very much, but I do think they all share very similar characteristics, which is one of the most challenging things about working with young children, is that the diagnostic criteria actually have a lot of mirroring of each other. And so it's really important that if you do have concerns that you touch base with a mental health professional who has specialty training in the diagnosis component of it. Well, let's go to our next question. And this one I'm going to gear towards Dr. Post. Dr. Post, can you talk about your thoughts on our current societal uncertainty and what future concerns do you worry about as a mental health provider, educator, researcher, and think parents need to look out for? Oh,
I'll even unmute myself to tell you this. Okay. You know, I think our current mental health challenges are impacted so greatly by this very moment in time around several issues, and I'm going to mention 2 of them. One is COVID. Some parents and children are not well suited to being at home so much with each other, and it's caused huge stress for parents and for children. Most parents are not well suited to making their children pay attention during Zoom meetings. they pass their children on to y'all, on to teachers, and they have to deal with the attention there. And now suddenly parents are in the shoes of having to make their children pay attention. And that is hard. They're not used to having that role of teacher. Learning new technologies has been extremely challenging in families. I think it's a very big current mental health challenge. And trying to work at home while you're trying to help your children work on their Zoom calls is just a challenge we have never seen before. In the springtime, when everybody was at home, it was one thing, but it continues now. Add poverty to this mix. I work in schools that have very high poverty level, and the challenges are even greater. I have a cousin who is a third grade teacher, and she says, we don't even know where we aren't seeing some of the children. It's like, where are they? So those are huge challenges we face. We are also in an election season that is about change and about huge changes. And in some families, it's been a very big issue on one side of the political spectrum or another. And depending on how much parents have TV on. And I mean, what did I hear that there was like 54 hours straight of cable news, with the red map and the blue map. So to what extent are our children exposed to that, seeing that and hearing their parents? So those are current issues that are huge. My concerns about these are based on the fact that many people, parents and children and us, may be lacking what we all need. And I think all humans need consistency and structure and support. And I think we can all be missing that. I like to tell stories, so I'm going to tell some stories. Y'all have told of several, and so I'll tell a story. These are, I've changed everything, so you cannot identify these people, and if you do, just don't mention it. Down the street from me, in one family, the middle school child is online all day, and the elementary school child goes to school every day. So there has to be a parent home with the child who's online and then picking up and taking a child to school. And right next door, our school system is on an A-B schedule. The children that they play with go to school on either Monday and Tuesday, everybody's off Wednesday, or Thursday and Friday. So what is going on in schools in my neighborhood is so diverse. And many parents have to deal with differences in these, which is very challenging. Let me tell you, this is a true story that I heard yesterday, and this again is in our neighborhood. There's a family with an only child. The child is in the 4th grade. Both parents work outside the home. In fact, the dad is out of town 2 days a week. The school is on an A-B schedule. This child goes to the YMCA for care, both after school on the day she's in school and on the days that there is no school, like on Wednesdays in our community. Someone in her group at the Y tested positive for COVID, and she went in on Monday, and that child tested positive. That family comes home, and that's what happened. They told her, don't come back for 2 weeks. She goes to school on Tuesday, and somehow the school knew it, and they took one look at her and said, don't come back for 2 weeks. We run into this family as I'm walking down the street, and it's like all of a sudden, everything is different. Their need for structure and consistency and support is so challenged at that moment. And it's a quick change. The changes are quick in coming. Another story, 14-year-old child, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, huge concern about germs, wants to stay inside all the time. Now won't go outside. At the beginning of this, they could go outside and take a walk. Now won't go outside. Temper tantrums. Julie, you mentioned motivation. This outstanding student, they can't get her to do her homework at all. She takes 1 hour to brush her teeth at night. Huge concerns. This is very, very challenging. More conflict, of course, at home, and there's conflict between the parents, as you might expect. So there are lots of challenges. Finally, a 2.5-year-old son, 2.5-year-old. This child doesn't have play dates. The parents are, they see grandparents, the parents are conscious of COVID. So this child is at home with very, very loving parents. The grandmother had a doctor's appointment. They masked up. They go to the doctor's office, and this child sees it makes me cry. This child sees a 4-year-old across the waiting room, and the mom sends me a picture of her 2.5-year-old, and that child is longing to be with another child. This child has no play dates. It's natural for children to want to be with other children. It's natural for them to want to go to school. It made me cry to see how much that child really wanted to be with another child. Those are stories that demonstrate the challenges today because we don't have structure and consistency. And we're in positions where we need to really work on providing support. We're very lucky. Research suggests that in times of crisis, they can have long-term effects on children's behavior as well. Wait, no, this is bad news. Research suggests that in times of crisis, children's behavior as well as their mental and emotional well-being can be challenged and impacted in negative ways. However, the good news is we also know from research that with the right support, hard times can build resiliency in young people and give them the ability to better handle stress and rebound from these challenges. So there is hope. So what are my concerns? My personal concerns are, what is the impact for children and parents when our current circumstances, specifically COVID and the challenges of this election where many parents are very passionate on one side or the other. How difficult is it for these parents to provide the kind of structure, consistency, and support that the children need? Are children becoming more engaged with screens? You know, this child, I said this 14-year-old, I saw this child the other day. That child did not take her eyes off of her telephone all day. She could not. I mean, and it was just like she would talk to me, but her phone became her crutch. And I think we've been concerned about screens. My concern is how much greater are our concerns about screens. The other thing is, what is the impact on children seeing their parents experience the level of stress that we're going through right now? With changing jobs, losing jobs, feeling upset with them because they can't get them to do their homework. If they feel concerned about our current events, maybe they're feeling relieved after the election, maybe they're feeling more upset after the election, but there's some stress around that. How does that impact children? Okay, so what can we do? I'll end on a more positive note. What can parents do and what can parents look for? We need to all remember this. It makes me cry to say it, but parents really know what is best for their children. They really know that. They know their children best. They love their children most. And we need to trust that. Parents need to provide as much, my mantra, consistency, structure, and support as they can. And as counselors, we spend a lot of time helping them understand how to do that. I'm not going to do that piece, but we know how to do that, which is good news. Then parents need to be sensitive to their child if the issues seem to be ramping up and it's no longer looking normal to the parent. That's when parents need to really be concerned. It could look like greater inflexibility, more emotional breakdowns, more yelling, more crying, having a shorter fuse. It could also look like being more withdrawn, being more quiet, only consoled when looking at a screen. It can look different. But the people who know that the best and the most are the caregivers for the children, the parents, teachers also, and other people. Then parents need to trust themselves in thinking something has gone awry. This isn't exactly right, and trust themselves on that. Finally, I had a colleague when I was at Ohio State before I came to UNCC about 1,000,000 years ago, who was a speech therapist. And he always said, with speech therapy, when a child goes off the tracks a little bit, let's get them on quickly. Don't let them stay off the rails too long. And I love that about counseling also. When parents know something has consistently gone awry and they sense it isn't feeling good, we need to help parents not wait for the problems to get bigger and bigger. We need to get that train back on the track as soon as we can. And then we need to contact Taylor, Cherie, and Julie, and just really get our children some counseling help. And those are my comments.
Can I tag into that?
Of course, please.
Dr. Post, hearing you talk reminded me that I kind of took some notes from my public social media page, which is really not just parents, but there are many educators and teachers on there too. And so some of the comments that they've made are, I feel trapped and suffocated. I'm having a tough time staying present and wanting to play with my child because I can't focus. I'm scared because I didn't know that this was going to happen. And I am having a hard time finding my balance. And so I think I've been really concerned about how parents are taking care of themselves and having really high expectations of themselves, thinking they're supposed to know how to parent during this time, and no one knows how to parent during COVID. It's never happened. But then on the other side of that, I see parents discovering how important it is to take care of themselves and becoming more aware of how overwhelmed they have been, and just suddenly realizing the same way that they want their kids to realize their feelings matter. The parents are also realizing that their feelings matter too, and really starting to try to figure out how to talk to themselves the way that they talk to those that they love. So although there's struggle and deep concern, I do see this empowerment piece of it too.
Taylor, just to build off of what you said, one thing that I've seen is for some families that this has actually been a reprieve from the craziness of their daily lives, and getting close family time has been a really huge strength of COVID too. We have lots of concerns about COVID, but there's also been this nice reconnection within family systems, reconnections within siblings, and learning how to get along again when sometimes that has gone awry prior to our current situation. Because there is no basketball, there is no sports or after school or there's limited, let me say there's very limited outside family structure time. So it's been really helpful for many families to also be reconnected. And then one other thing that Dr. Post mentioned was screen time. And I think there is a real concern in the the health community, in particular the neuroscience community. So one thing that happens when we're on screens, because screens move so fast and everything is so active, that the brain is releasing a lot of pleasure hormones all at one time. So our children are having a dopamine deficit in their body. So some of the lack of motivation and other stuff is actually a neurologically, hormonally driven lack of motivation, and they're almost withdrawing from their screens, similar to an addict who is taking a drug or something else, that it's affecting our brains in the same way. And so, so it is hard for kids in this current day when we're asking them for school to spend so much time on screen, and then their social connection is on screen and their pleasure activities are on screen, for them to have motivation or to have any drive to do anything else, because they're really depleted. So having really structured time, as Dr. Post kind of highlighted, and really having a consistent policy around when they can be on screens and when they can't is really important right now. It's always important, but it's particularly important when we're becoming more dependent on screen time to be our all for many of our students all day, and for many of our children throughout the day.
I read something, I was just going to say that I read something that said that parents need to really just remember the structure of little things like dinner time together every night. You know, it's not like they have to, but that is not screen related. And sometimes maybe we do need to help parents support them in these little things that they're probably doing anyway that are really helpful for their children.
Yeah, and I saw on Pinterest a great little dinner cards that have like a different starter conversation to the table. So if you're struggling because you're depleted, utilize resources that are out there that you can tap into. You don't have to think of it all by yourself. And yes, it's a screen activity to find them on Pinterest, but it can be a wealth of really helpful tools and activities. Julie or Cherie, did you guys want to add anything?
I wanted to add, Cherie talked earlier about trauma. This is a traumatic situation that's going on right now. And oftentimes you do feel that trauma, maybe it's a small trauma. Maybe it's an acute trauma right now, and that's in your body. So even if they're going through it a little bit right now, future concerns are it could still be in there when they get older, and then it could be on top of something else. Perhaps the parent loses the job. So there are many little things that could come later that we don't see now. So that's one of the concerns I have, because in dealing with kids that already have mental health challenges, this is an extra teeth, whether it's a big or a little to that family, and then it compounds and then it gets even worse down the road. So when you start to notice those things, that's why it's really important to get that mental health help for the kids as well.
And we really define trauma as a stress reaction in the body, and feeling so overwhelmed that an individual is having difficulty managing the stress that they're experiencing, and it leads to a sense of fear or a sense of hopelessness or helplessness. And I'm sure we can all relate to those three feelings right now a little bit in our own lives, since it's been so unpredictable and uncertain. And so when Julie's talking about trauma, that's really what she's talking about, is this level of stress. And then kids aren't, and adults, right? Like when it stays in your body and you experience it for such a long time, your body has to learn how not to be in that state of high stress. And not be triggered by little things that will put you in a high state of stress. And so that tolerance for stress really changes in times of trauma and post-trauma experiences.
So I was just going to add just a little bit to what Julie said. In terms of, I believe my concern is just that, exactly that trauma, and just almost like developing to like this constant or consistent state of crisis, of not being able to handle everything. Just layers upon layers of stressors that can turn into distress, and further impact just mental health and overall well-being. And just like what others have said, just the changes in like the interactions with family, with each other, with peers, and the connections, losing the connections with each other, losing the ability to socialize, and just this increased, again, screen time and identity development, and how people and how these kids are identifying and learning to identify themselves, with there's being so much social media, and having these influences, and that's what they're kind of taking from. And then I think what Dr. Post said as well, just the mental health of parents. So, mental health of parents trickles down to children. Children respond and react how adults do to situations. So those were just a couple things that I'm concerned about, and just more depressive and anxious symptoms all around increasing.
Thank you. So now I want to pose a question to the whole panel about if you guys could speak to some healthy coping strategies and mechanisms that parents can utilize, that parents can help their kids utilize or teach their children who are struggling with mental health concerns. Julie, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Number one, you definitely want to take care of yourself physically. Make sure that if you notice, if you have any symptoms or anything, take care of those. Take care of yourself physically. Make sure you get the good sleep if you can, good diet, all those physical things. Also, another thing is try to find positive moments. As much as things are tough right now, there's always a positive moment somewhere, and see how many of those positive moments that you can find. You might have to look really hard, and they are there, and those positive moments can help you when things are tough. have a sense of, like Dr. Post said, structure and consistency. Have goals, have plans to accomplish something. I'm aware some parents do say, oh, well, let the kids make their own schedule. They're old enough to make their own schedule. Help your kids make a schedule, because you need to have things to look forward to. It's important to have something to work towards, because perhaps we can't do a lot of the things we want to, and maybe we could take up a new hobby. And then just coping for the unexpected, which we have to expect the unexpected right now. Even though things are going well, they're not going well, and we just have to cope ahead for the next thing that might happen. So those are just a couple of things that parents and kids can do. Parents, especially modeling to their kids and supporting their kids and being able to do these things.
Thank you, Julie. Taylor or Cherie, do you have anything to add?
I can tag off of Julie because I agree with her, especially when you said making sure you are finding or focusing on some positives. So I think for parents and educators, try to find an interest or a hobby that you are passionate about and that you find some joy in, and then trying to fit in the nooks and crannies in your day, ways where you can take care of yourself. So maybe it is like listening to your favorite song when you go to the bathroom, or making an experience out of your shower and your fuzzy slippers are like waiting on the outside for you to wear. And then knowing that it is important for you to be calm when you respond to kids, and it's okay for you to take your time to respond.
So I had a few that I wanted to share. And what I actually have like visuals, because I like to actually like to set these up in the classroom. So it's like a little calming kit, and you can get these baskets. I got this actually at Walmart, but you can, there's some on Amazon as well. So this was like 99 cents at Walmart. But like some different things, and especially like for kids, is having like just blank sheets of paper, crayons, so they can draw, they can go to. I like to use scales. So I use this a lot, oftentimes with kids, like this mood meter. And so it's like 1 to 10, and they're able to visualize, and they take a little marker and they mark where they are with their feelings. And then, of course, after speaking about their feelings and what's going on, you do like a pre and post. So you see what the difference is afterwards, and like, you know, how they shifted, how they moved. But it's a way to help them so that they aren't just verbalizing everything. They can kind of start by circling things. And another two is just this little thing that I use with them as well. It's like a check-in for school, home, and their friendships. And so basically, again, they take a marker, a dry erase marker, and they draw the different feeling faces that they feel for each. And it's like a starting point for like a conversation, or they can act it out. Mandalas, so you can get these at like the dollar store, but they are things that they can kind of just draw to help them to focus. Created these. These are some basically like some calming bottles. So you just take a regular old water bottle that you've used before and put some glitter glue and glitter inside of it, and just and glue, super glue the top. And then basically, and the kids love this too, it's something that you can sit out, and it just takes their focus away from whatever they're, you know, stressing about or doing at that time. Bubbles, huge, because it's also a way to help them with getting out, and actually helping with the breathing techniques, breathing exercises. I always have stress balls in hand, ready to go, so that they can go and use that as a way. I actually had some kids make me this. It's called a happy cup. And so they put like positive quotes and positive things in there. So like in a time where, again, you're just feeling, just not feeling too well, not feeling down or whatever it is, stressed out, take it out. And it's like, you know, you are important, you have friends, but being able to kind of almost like shift and reframe and look at it in a positive light, and positive self-talk too. I think that's for the most part of the different things. But also too, I mean, just to add to what people said, to what everyone said, is just the checking in on your own mental health and your own feelings, and you know, just building on your emotional intelligence. being able to use and identify different feeling words to express how you're feeling. Definitely the structured routines. I saw how that was major for a second grade student that I recall that was just having issues with completing his work. He was having meltdowns and he didn't have a visual schedule. So I just suggested to mom to write a visual schedule and help him and let him be a part of that. And you guys sit down, write it out, and it's just sitting up there so that he has it. And each day he's able to go through and knows exactly what to expect, when, and like it helped him tremendously. Um, of course, I would, suggest counseling. So whether it's, reaching out to the school counselor, psychologist, again, just family counseling, individual counseling, those resources are out there to help. There's nothing wrong with being able to process what's going on in a safe space. I think that's so important. Mindfulness. I am huge on mindfulness and using mindfulness techniques. So breathing exercises. I use the Hoberman sphere a lot with kids to show them how when you take a deep breath in, your belly should expand out like a balloon and then blow back out. So helping them to have that visual of how to take deep breaths, how to get back centered, using grounded techniques, progressive muscle relaxation. So all those things to just help them be in the here and now, in the moment, and then to further be able to kind of express what they're going through and how they're feeling. Like I said, scaling check-in. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling right now? I'm at a 5. Okay, what can get you at a 6? Okay, what are some things that we can do? Another thing was like a daily check-in. So maybe 15 minutes every day, just have it carved out. And you talk about your highlights and lowlights. And I actually got that from a kindergarten student who was like one of my faves, but she did that every single day. She talked about her highlights of the day and her lowlights. And so just having that space and time for the child to be able to express themselves and just have that listening ear. And just other creative modes of expression. So whether it's physical activity, getting outside, whether it's listening to music is huge in calming our mood, our emotions, art, play. And another thing that was actually really helpful too is lavender aromatherapy. That's huge. I just keep some in my office and it's such a calming, soothing smell and scent. Yeah, I see you, Dr. Post. It's so helpful. So I think those are the main things that I thought about and the things that I've utilized during my time in the school, and also just the connections. I also really encourage parents to have virtual play dates, to have these different things, because kids are losing that connection time. So being able to provide that and have Zoom meetings with the family and family members that they're missing. And sorry, one more thing. A jar. So I saw this somewhere, but it was especially when the pandemic hit. So there's things that come up and it's like, oh man, I wish I can go to the pool, or oh man, I wish I can go to Carowinds. So write those things down, grab a sticky note, write that thing down that you want to do and throw it into a jar. And so when it's time, when things get to a more safe time or space or place, you can go through your jar, take it out, like, what did I write? Okay, cool. Let's go to Carowinds. Be able to have like just a list of things, the things that you want to do, put them in a jar so that do them when you can, when you're able to.
I think that's also a really nice reminder of our wishes don't have to be big. They can be small, simple kind of tasks that we're missing right now. And when life does get crazy and hectic again, because it goes back to something that resembles pre-March 2019, that we can remind ourselves what the really important things were for us. Cherie, you mentioned breathing, and there's lots of things that you can do that don't require any tools or manipulatives that you need. So blowing a birthday candle out or letting your child blow your hair is also another way. Can they blow it slow? How fast can they blow it? Those are all breathing techniques that can slow the body down. So if your child is really low, you want them to speed up their breathing to hype up their system. And if their system is really hyper, you want to slow it down. And so you kind of model either way. I also like 5-star breathing, which is your 5 fingers. When you go up, you're either inhaling or exhaling, and then you do the opposite, but your child can't rush through it. You want them to go nice and slow, and maybe look at a clock and let them know when they need to finish so that they can kind of mirror that. Also, just laying down and putting your hand on your belly and feeling your belly rise and your belly deflate can also be really calming and centering. And then for me, the other thing is movement. I'm spending way too much time in a chair and on a screen, so I'm doing this hunchy thing in my chair, and adults might recognize that, but kids are also starting to experience body aches like they've never had before. So getting up and moving as a family and doing different tasks and ideas. I've seen families have competitions about, like putting the laundry away, who can put the basket in their room the fastest, or in a playful, not in a super competitive way, but making it engaging and fun to build that motivation that might be missing. And so those might be some helpful tips. There's so many that we can go. Yeah, Taylor, you have one more thing?
She made me think of two things, and I'll go quickly. But when she mentioned high point, low point, I thought of the rosebud and thorn. So rose is tell me a positive about your day, and maybe the thorn is tell me something that's been stressful and really hard for you. And the bud, what are you looking forward to, or what idea is blossoming? And then she made me also think about when it comes to coping, playing with you as parents and educators, because play does not always incorporate toys. So maybe it's singing with them, or maybe it's making a silly face back and forth with each other, or finding some item to put in your hand and encouraging them to guess what it is. And those moments are really short and they matter.
Thank you, Taylor. I have two quick closing remarks. I'm going to share my screen again. So when you're thinking about mental health, I like the acronym TIPS. It came from a former colleague of mine. And what TIPS stands for, one, and I think it was Julie who mentioned this, trust your intuition and your gut as a parent. If something feels off, it's probably off. And then the next one is see what you can do around the house to make a shift, to support, or activities that can help intervene with your child. And if you don't see a change within 2 weeks, so that problem is persisting, which is the P, that's when you want to seek professional help for your child. So you can attempt things at home, but if you're not seeing big change, that it's okay to ask help from a professional. And a professional looks different in every community. It could be a church leader, it could be a mental health professional, it could be a teacher, a school counselor. There's so many helpers out there. It might be a coach for a sport that your child is supporting in. And then also, if we're seeing any self-harming behavior, make sure that receives attention right away. So that could be cutting, suicidal thoughts, or any type of suicidal action. And then to summarize what we have said today, I want to go to just some things to remember. These are from a training that all of us are trained in, called child-parent relationship training, and have a lot of value to us as mental health professionals. So the first one, and these are just little quippy statements that help us remember the important things for our children and for ourselves. So the first one is to focus on the donut, not the hole. It means look for the strengths and the positive things in your children and in your own life. I think multiple people had mentioned that between Cherie and Julie and Taylor. We also want to be a thermostat and not a thermometer. We want to be responsive and not reactive. So a thermometer reacts to its environment. It just tells you what has changed. A thermostat sets the tone, which can be really challenging right now, but to the best of our ability, trying to set the tone of how we would like our children to experience our home lives and our world. And then we make mistakes. We're human beings and we're all fallible. Not one of us is perfect. And so it's not what we do, it's what we do after what we have done, which is a famous quote from a play therapist in the field. And what he is sharing here is that repair is really important. So if you do something to damage a relationship, or you react in a way that you don't really love, it's okay to go back and tell them that you're sorry, and that you were stressed, or that's not how you intended it to come out. And that is when kids really learn how to repair when they make mistakes, but B, that they know that you care enough to come back and share with them that you want to try differently in the future as a parent, and that helps role model for them. we can't give away what we don't possess. This is that airline analogy of putting the oxygen mask on. If your tank is really low, you can't fulfill your children's tank. So really remember to take care of yourself. Also, if your child is drowning, don't teach them to swim, which sounds silly, but our children are drowning in their emotions and the stress that they're experiencing. And it's not the time to go to teach them a new skill or to educate them in the moment. It might be a moment to just sit back and be with them and help them regulate by doing some of those coping strategies like the stress ball, the check-ins, the thorn and the rose analogy. Where there are no limits, there is no security. This is what Dr. Post talked about, which is this idea of being consistent and predictable for your children so that they feel safe and secure in their world. Anytime you can, support your child's feelings, the good ones and the hard ones. We all experience all emotions. Not one of us is Pollyanna all the time, a reference to a really old movie there, but we can't all see the positives at every moment. And it's what makes the biggest difference for many children and for many adults is they are seen in their hardest times, not just in their in their best times. And so letting them know, they're really struggling and it's okay to talk. That's not going to cause your child to struggle more. Shockingly enough, it actually helps oftentimes get them to a point of regulation, because then they can say, okay, yes, I am angry. And then there's opportunity to process or to work on or play through that. Also, where you can put creativity in your life, creativity brings joy. And when all else fails, I always ask myself, what action or words will most preserve my relationship and do the least harm with my child in this moment? And that might mean you need to lock yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes. And so just know that it's not always the one that you think a therapist would say, but it sometimes is, I just need to go outside and let my child run around like a crazy person inside, or how important is this Zoom meeting in this very moment? And I know teachers might push back on that, but in that moment, it might be good for the child to disconnect for 5 minutes so you can have them for the next 2 hours online. And so just remember, your children best. We've enjoyed having you. Please come back. Next week, we have another session on wellness and self-care by some of our colleagues in the counseling department. So please join us again next week. We also put some resources up on this teeny URL line for you, so please utilize that. We have different mental health and coping strategies up there for you, and some developmental tasks. Thank you, guys.
So thank you so much to Christy and to all of the panelists today for sharing. I do just want to let you know that you will receive a copy of the slide deck with access to all the resources that they shared, and a copy of the recording, because there's so much information that you shared today. And I was like, just taking notes and thinking about processing everything. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise and tips with us today.